Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
My name is Dan Wasserstein. I'm an association attorney. That's all that we do at our office is represent associations. It's 100% of our practice. And a big part of that practice, especially for our office, is collections of bad debt, of assessments that haven't been paid and related charges. It's something that's uncomfortable, but it's something that the board has a fiduciary duty to do, and we really make it a hallmark of our practice. We have a team of people who are dedicated in our office only to collections and foreclosures. That's all they do. They answer owner questions. We help get people on payment plans, and we make sure we move the files forward really, really fast. So if we can help any of you with your collections, I would certainly encourage you to give me a call. We would be happy to set up a meeting with you. And today will be good information for you to learn more about how the process works and what we can do to help you. We'll be taking questions at the end. I see there's already a couple. I'll be happy to address some of those at the end. The presentation is really not all that long. So I will make some time to answer your questions. So I'm going to now start sharing my screen and we'll start the presentation. All right. So again, this is the collection and foreclosure CEU. Our information's there on our firm. So look, when people fall behind on their assessments with the association, they end up usually catching up pretty quickly. A lot of times the board or the management company will send demand letters. They'll send now what's called a notice of late assessment letter. And those are letters that are designed to avoid the file coming over to me, to the lawyer's office. These are your neighbors. These are people you know. And you want to be as fair with them as you can. But you have to balance that fairness with doing your due diligence for your association's budget. So once you've sent those letters, it is important to make sure that you authorize your management agent or your office staff to send those files over to the attorney, because if it lingers for more than, let's say, 60 or 90 days or 120 days, you really don't want to wait much longer than that, because that's what got in a lot of associations in trouble back in the recession. They just waited and thought, well, they'll catch up eventually, and it snowballs and creates a lot of problems. So once you've passed those initial thresholds, those what we call pre-legal efforts to get your owner to pay, if they still haven't paid, then it gets turned over to us. And the first thing that we do here is the first bullet point. It's called an intent to lien letter. And basically it tells the owner, if you don't pay the amount that's owed to the association, plus the additional late fees, interest, attorney's fees, within 45 days, the association is going to record a lien against your property. And of course, a lien is a recorded document. It's filed with the county. And that's a document that notifies the world that this person owes money. And most people don't want a lien recorded on their property. So if they can work that out, they will within that 45 days. Of course, if they don't work that out within the 45 days, then the association would record its lien, and you send what's called an intent to foreclose or a copy of the claim of lien. The intent to foreclose letter says, okay, we sent you the first notice, you didn't pay up in time, so now we're sending you another notice. And if you're picking up on it, the legislature really gives your delinquent owners a lot of opportunity to make good. So this is yet another 45 days you have to give them on the lien to pay off the debt, plus again the fees and costs and everything else, before a foreclosure can be filed. So if you notice, even after you've done all your pre-legal efforts, which could have been a few months, we as the lawyers have at least 90 more days before we can file a foreclosure lawsuit. That's again why we encourage, be vigilant, stay on top of these, because there's a lot of statutory windows of time and delay that add on to any courtesy extensions you're going to afford your owners. So it's not as if once you turn it over, it's, immediate action. We have to abide by these statutory limits. So again, letter 1, 45 days, then we put a lien, letter 2, 45 days. And if they still don't pay, that's the point where we as the law firm can file a foreclosure lawsuit. Of course, at that foreclosure lawsuit, again, the owner can pay at any time, but as they're going through these processes, there's more and more that becomes owed, more interest, more late fees, more attorney's fees, and court costs. So they can stop the bleeding at any time. And of course, we encourage people to do that. We will offer them, sometimes we'll even discount our own attorney's fees to help out. We will offer, where the associations approve of it, payment plans, all sorts of different things. But again, ultimately, if we're moving things along and the owners don't pay, they do end up in foreclosure. And what happens at the end of a foreclosure is a judge orders a sale of the property. The property is sold to the highest bidder. The association is paid its judgment amount from that sale. And if there's any excess money that was bid above and beyond the judgment, that would go back to the owner as their money. Now, it's important to note at those auctions, the board members and management cannot bid on those auctions. They don't want there to be any sort of conflict there. So just be mindful that if you have a property that's at your association auction and you are a board member or you're the manager of that property, you cannot bid on that auction. And here is a flow chart we like to add in. We provide this to all our clients. The clients really like it. It starts at the top left, and that just goes right through the process. And honestly, when you get a copy of this presentation, you'll probably find this page to be the most valuable. And it just goes right down the line through what I had mentioned there, the intent to lien letter, intent to foreclose letter, all the way through the lawsuit. Of course, we make evaluations at certain points. Is there a bank foreclosure? Is there anything else going on? And we'll always decide what's in the best interest of the association. There are other firms that take a more conservative approach. Like, for example, when there's a bank foreclosure, they'll say, oh, well, the bank has a case, so we're not going to do anything. We'll just wait for them. I never take that approach unless the bank is really all the way at the end of their case. I believe we can beat the bank to the punch. And quite honestly, based on what the law is for foreclosures, you want to beat the bank to a sale, because if they have a sale and they end up with the property, you get pennies on what you're owed, and that's by statute. But if you can get to a sale first and get a third party to buy it at your sale that happens in advance, that's how we get you 100% of your money back. But if we just sit on it and wait, we are resigning you to get a very, very small amount. By statute, it's 1% of the mortgage or 12 months of assessments, whatever's less when a bank forecloses. So if you wait for the bank to foreclose and you're accruing hundreds and thousands of dollars of debt, and let's say the unit had a $200,000 mortgage, they're very likely, the bank, only going to have to pay you a grand total of $2,000 towards whatever that back due was. It could be $20,000. And if you let the bank go ahead of you, you're resigning yourself in that example to only $2,000. So we advance everything. And the good thing about the way we do it, we don't charge the association our fees as we go. So we're pushing, we're doing everything we can. And the reason we can help you guys do that is because we're not doing it at your expense. We're doing it at our expense. So again, that's why our strategy is always push these things forward. And I think it's really beneficial to take that approach. And this is just a good slide for all of you to look at later. Now, how else can we possibly collect money? What are some other things we can do here to collect your money? Well, if the owner has a tenant living in their unit that's paying them rent, we can make that tenant pay over the rent to the association until the debt is paid in full. There's a statutory process that allows that. And it's a letter that we send, and we do it quite often, and we have a lot of success doing it. And it's basically a rent interception letter. The tenant has to pay over their rent or they face eviction from the association. Again, of course, we notify the owner as well. And a lot of times, just the embarrassment of the owner's tenant getting that letter is enough that the tenant says, hey, I'm sorry, the owner says, hey, my tenant got your letter. Let me just pay this off so I don't disrupt my relationship with the tenant. So sometimes it has that sort of impact, which either way, whether the tenant pays the money or it makes the owner pay up what they owe, it's doing its job, that letter. And like I said, if the tenant refuses to pay, we can't go after the tenant any further for the money, but the penalty to them is eviction. So it is a pretty strict penalty if they don't comply. A lot of times the homeowner will threaten the tenant and say, well, if you don't pay me the rent, I'm going to evict you. But by statute, if the tenant is paying the association the rent, they are immune from being evicted by the owner. So if any owners threaten tenants in that way, we make sure to notify tenants that you are protected from the owner evicting you when they're paying over the rent to the association. So that's another way that the association is able to collect money. Of course, and other penalties here when people don't pay what they're owed or what they owe, if they are more than 90 days past due on any monetary obligation, whether it's assessments or a fine or anything else, you have the right to suspend their amenity use rights. You also, if the debt is over $1,000, can give them 30 days warning and suspend their voting rights in the association as well. So not only can you go after tenants, but you can also take away the use rights of tenants and owners who are residing in a unit that is not paying and is delinquent. So again, that's usually the suspension of amenity rights is more valuable than the suspension of voting rights. And it's something the board votes on at a meeting. And if someone's over 90 days past due, they can no longer use amenities. Now, what do amenities mean? We're talking about the swimming pool, the fitness center, anything else that's a pure amenity, tennis courts, things like that. You cannot take away, for example, people's parking rights or, their access to the community. Now, a little more controversial remedies that are sometimes taken away. Sometimes associations have the ability to turn off cable television to delinquent units. It's considered a controversial remedy. It's fairly useful, but controversial. And in that same vein, in HOAs, when people owe money, the board will sometimes vote to take away their resident gate transponder access, meaning they have to wait in the line of traffic in the guest line every time they want to come in the community. Again, it's a controversial remedy as to whether it's viable or not. There's legal reasons we believe it is, but there are arguments on the other side as well. But very highly effective in HOAs. You'd be surprised how much people are irritated by having to go through that line, and it does get people to pay up. So again, suspension of use rights is something that's valuable, but it's something to consult your association attorney on. And of course, another item here is ineligibility for the board. When in a homeowners association, if an owner owes anything at all for any reason, they cannot be a candidate for the board. In a condo association, it's only an assessment that makes them ineligible to be a candidate for the board. But again, there are pure eligibility requirements there that are important to note. Once someone is on the board, if they're more than 90 days delinquent, then they basically get kicked off the board. But again, to run for the board in an HOA, they have to have a completely clean slate. And in a condo, they could have a fine, but they cannot have any assessments when they're being a candidate. But once they're on the board, both HOA or condo, if they start to owe any money, if it goes beyond 90 days, they are automatically removed from the board. So again, we're talking about collections and delinquencies, and these are things to be mindful of, especially with your own board members. Now, we talked about collections in the special assessment era. And what we're talking about that for, and in the context, is now. As all of you are probably aware, especially in condominiums, there's more laws, more restrictions, more requirements, and we're seeing a lot more special assessments for projects, for necessary work. And so that's what this slide is about. And I call it, when I talk to my clients, I call it the 4 I's. In the last few years have really contributed to special assessments and ultimately delinquencies that are on the rise. The first one is inflation. You know, starting after COVID, we had a lot of good years in COVID. When I say good years, we still had low interest rates and we had our home values rising. Well, and we had a lot of money that was being given out by the government. That all doesn't come without penalty. At some point, there has to be a repercussion of all that. And that was the inflation that we started to see in 2022 and 2023. So naturally, as things get more expensive, it affects everything. It's not just eggs and gasoline, but all your vendors, they have employees that have to be paid, and labor rates have gone up, equipment, materials, everything went up significantly. And of course, that's passed along. So we once had a woman a year ago say, you know, with everything in the world getting so much more expensive, how can you raise our dues? And I said, because everything's more expensive. And so associations aren't immune to that. So number one is inflation. Number two, I briefly just mentioned interest rates. Again, money was cheap for a long time. We had 3% loans everyone was getting. Money has gotten a lot more expensive. It's come down a little bit, but the days of seeing 30-year mortgages at 2 and 3% numbers are long gone. And it's, you know, we're looking at numbers. They were up as much as, 8, 9%. They've come back down more, 5, 6, 7%. But there's still significantly more. So that's adding to people's strain, especially people who have adjustable rate mortgages, because as those, their rate that they got 4 or 5 years ago is going to be going up, and it makes their home and their expense of living there more expensive. The third item are inspections and repairs, and that's a product of for condos, that's a product of Champlain Towers, the Surfside collapse. We had that a few years ago now. It's been where the building came down, people died, it was a tragedy. And the legislature said, you know what? We're not going to let people vote their wallets over their life safety anymore. So in condominiums now, we have forced inspections. They're called milestone inspections for 3-story buildings and higher. And those milestone inspections are revealing work that needs to be done. And again, that's what's contributing to more assessments and more expense, because these things, instead of the can getting kicked down the road a little more, it's all forced to be happening now and quickly. So, and now with government intervention. So inspections and repairs are obviously contributing. Again, that's more expense. And then finally, insurance. For the last several years, insurance has skyrocketed. In 2021, 22, the numbers were astronomical that associations were paying, because we had hurricane claims, that insurance companies were going out of business. We had insurance companies that refused to insure South Florida because South Floridians have become so litigious in suing insurance carriers, and there's been so many groups of adjusters and contractors and lawyers that go around, and every time there was even the most minimal storm, they were putting in claims, because it was basically a free shot. If you could sue and make a claim with your insurance, and if you filed a lawsuit, you could get attorney's fees if they didn't pay your claim, But if you made a false claim or a bad claim, it didn't go the other way. So the legislature has since made efforts to reduce the litigation and to encourage more insurance carriers to come into the market. And hopefully, insurance over the last year and a half has started to kind of settle in, thankfully. But keep in mind, we just had 2 devastating storms within the last few months, not devastating to South Florida, but very bad for the western and other central parts of the state. And that affects all of us because those insurance carriers, have risk all over the state. And so it makes everyone's rates go up when they have large claims they have to pay out. So unfortunately, we got a little reprieve, but the anticipation is very possible that in the next year or so, we might see another increase because of those hurricanes. And we'll have to see what happens in the future. So in any case, it is more important now than I wouldn't say ever, but since 2008 and 2009, since the Great Recession, it is more important than ever since then to have a collection policy in place and make sure you are actively working with your management, with your lawyer, to be diligently collecting the money. I understand running an association, it's strange. It's different than running a regular corporation. A regular business, when their customers owe them money, they're customers. They don't have any other relationship other than a business relationship. But for all of us, we live in associations. Our customers are our neighbors. They might be our next door neighbor that doesn't pay their dues. It might be someone across the street. It might be someone who your kids play with their kids. It makes it very difficult. But as a board member, you have to be fair and consistent, and you have to make sure you collect your assessments. They are the lifeblood of your community. And you don't want to have to tell your community that you can't afford to do the necessary things: landscaping, trash removal, pay the utilities, pay the insurance, because your delinquencies are preventing you from doing that. You want to be staying on top of them and be vigilant. And that's really the message of the times here. I do see, Ashley, do you want to take us through some questions?
Sorry. Yeah, let's do it. Let me pull the Q&A up. All right, let's see here. Put myself on the video. Here we go. All right, let's see here. So let's just go through some of these because we have so much time. All right, can a condo association force a sale and or evict a delinquent owner if there is a first mortgage?
Yes, they absolutely can.
Okay. Can delinquent fees be part of a bankruptcy?
Yes, the delinquent fees are part of a bankruptcy in a Chapter 13, which is like a payment plan bankruptcy. The money that's owed, we file what's called a proof of claim. And in most circumstances, yes, we can recover that money. Sometimes if the mortgage debt is too large, the owner can strip, it's called lien stripping, the lesser liens, the association and other liens that are not superior, if the value of the property is underwater, meaning that if the first mortgage eats up all the value. We saw that a lot more in the recession because homes were upside down. We don't see that anymore. Most homes and condos have equity above and beyond the mortgage so that the lien of the association is no longer stripped out in bankruptcy because there's room in the equity of the home to secure that. So we do collect the money in bankruptcy.
Okay, let's see here. If there is no mortgage, can a lien foreclosure still be an option?
Oh, absolutely. If there's no mortgage, it's even better. It means that you're almost guaranteed to get a buyer at your association sale if there's no mortgage. So yeah, absolutely not just an option. It's a great option because there's nothing preventing buyers at that sale from buying it. When there is a mortgage and you're foreclosing as the association, the mortgage survives. So a buyer has to look and say, well, if I'm buying this at the foreclosure sale and it has a $300,000 mortgage, is there enough room that I can fix this thing up and sell it and make money? But if there's no mortgage, then they're just buying it basically for whatever it's being sold at the association foreclosure. And maybe there might be some real estate taxes or something else owed. But if there's no mortgage, that's the best case scenario as far as foreclosing on a unit.
What if there is a reverse mortgage on the property? Is there a way to find out if there is one?
I mean, reverse mortgages are public record, the same as a regular mortgage. So you'd have to search the public records, but they are recorded just like a regular mortgage.
All right, let's see here. Can the association rent a vacant unit, rent paid directly to the association?
Yeah, the association can do what's called, you can petition the court to appoint the association as a receiver temporarily of the property, even while the association doesn't own it, and rent out an abandoned property. There's procedure for that. No one really does that anymore. Again, that was a product of the recession when foreclosures would take 4 years to get through. But now we can get through them much quicker. And the effort and time, by the time you get the receiver appointed, list the unit, get a tenant in there, you can already basically have foreclosed on it anyway and gotten a new owner and a new, instead of that. So almost never does that happen anymore.
All right, and let's see here. Okay. What if the condo docs do not indicate that you can suspend amenity rights to the delinquent owner?
Well, I mean, that becomes a legal question about your docs if you have what's called Kaufman language, and I'm not going to get into that, down that rabbit hole today, but there's a statutory right to do these things. So it's not just that it has to be in the docs, but you have a statutory right. And what I tell clients that don't have it in their docs to mirror the statute, it's always a good idea to just put it at least in your rules and regulations to say that, for owners that are more than 90 days past due, that we're going to follow the statute in suspending their amenity use rights or voting rights.
Can you file to suspend their rights before the 90 days if you go before the fining committee to do it?
Not for delinquency, no.
All right, let's see here. What happens when courthouse bidders wise up and nobody bids on a condo lien? Isn't the association going to get stuck?
Yeah, the association, if there's no bidders on a sale, then the property ends up going back to the association. The association ends up with ownership subject to the mortgage. But again, it doesn't mean they're liable for the mortgage. It just means that eventually the bank is going to take the unit. They're going to foreclose it themselves. So what does that mean? That means the association can rent the unit. And again, we're going back to the recession. That happened more frequently 12 years ago, let's say, 14 years ago. Even with mortgages on properties now, I can tell you we've filed thousands of cases in the last, let's say, 5 years. I cannot recall one instance in the last 5 years where one of our clients ended up the bidder where there were no buyers. So that happened when properties were significantly underwater. But nowadays, because of the appreciation that happened during COVID to all these properties, the mortgages are less than the value. And so even if there is a mortgage, we are constantly, every day, we had a unit up for sale this morning that has a mortgage on it. We had 2 up for sale yesterday. One of them had a mortgage on it. All 3 foreclosure sales had bidders that paid. There was competitive bidding and there was a sale. So that doesn't really happen anymore.
And then another one on here, a new homeowner is not responsible for past due monies, right? That's what they wrote.
No, they are. A new owner is responsible for the prior assessments that the prior owner accrued. They are by statute, unless there's a case that says unless the governing documents absolve them of it. So, and that's only at a foreclosure. That's not a regular sale. I can't rack up thousands of debt and then give you, Ashley, the home and you don't have to pay that. But if I go in a foreclosure and you buy it at a foreclosure, and that association's documents say that anyone that acquires title at a foreclosure is off the hook for whatever was due previously, then the new buyer's off the hook. So we see sometimes some investors will look for those types of communities that have that language. They'll buy at bank foreclosures a unit in that community, and the association might say, "Hey, you owe, there's $20,000 of assessments," and that buyer will say, "Yeah, but your documents let me off the hook for that." So too bad, so sad. And we've amended that out. That's become a very common amendment that me and my fellow lawyers over the last 8 years since the case came out on that have been amending for associations so that they don't have that language that basically wipes out all that debt.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned payment plans. Are there any laws, regulations that would need to be followed? Oh, I lost it. It went away. Hold on. Someone asked another question. Sorry. That would need to be followed to set up the payment plan, I believe was the question.
It's just whatever the association's parameters are for that. But there's no statutory provisions for payment plans because payment plans are entirely discretionary. A board does not have to give anyone a payment plan. So it's within the board's discretion. It's basically like a settlement it's up to them to decide what the terms are. So for our clients, a lot of them will say, okay, we'll offer a payment plan, but it's got to be equal monthly payments and there are fees for doing it. So it's not just, that they can just stretch it out without for free. There are fees that often go along with that.
Mm-hmm. And then I see on here, people are asking about the recording. I will be emailing out the recording and the presentation after, so that will come out after. Let's see here. Let's see. Does the association seek to appoint a guardian ad litem if an owner is deceased?
So yeah, when we file a foreclosure lawsuit, you don't have to do that, but we always do that. We do two things. We file what's called a notice of action, which is a publication that we put in a newspaper. It's issued by the court. We publish it for 2 weeks that basically says to the world, hey, if you're an heir or a relation or you have an interest in this deceased person's property, please make a filing. And we also will ask for a guardian so that the court can appoint someone who does due diligence to locate those people as well. It's not required, but we do it to make sure that, at the end of the case, there's not some person coming out of the woodwork that says, well, you didn't try to find me. And we say, well, we did a publication. We had a court-appointed professional. We did, we didn't leave any stone unturned.
Can you place a lien and sue for a foreclosure if the owner has not paid the special assessment only? So they're paying their dues, they just haven't paid the special assessment.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. What do you recommend be included in an association's collection policy? Does the policy need to be included in the association's governing docs?
Policy should just dictate when the pre-legal letters will be sent, when interest is added, when late fees are added, which should be by the governing docs, but it should lay all that out. And then it should lay out when you turn the file over to the lawyer, whether it's 60 or 90 days. And I know companies just like Campbell, they have forms like that they ask their clients to fill out so that they, as the management agent, have that direction. It should be made part of your rules. It should be voted on. And that way, if an owner ever says, well, you prematurely did this or you charged me something I shouldn't be, you have a set of rules. You can say, we followed our procedure and here's our written procedure that we apply to everyone.
Can you mention in a board meeting the names of the person the community is leaning or foreclosing on?
Good question. The answer is no, you cannot. That violates fair debt collection practices. You can reference units without specifying the unit number or the person's name, but it's considered a breach of fair debt collection law, state and federal, to publish a hit list, which, some communities, they want to post a deadbeat list on the elevator, or they want to read them off at a meeting. You cannot use a public forum like that to shame people for non-paying.
Is there a way to prevent the delinquent owner from rebuying their own unit at the foreclosure auction?
No, there's no way to do that, but it's pretty foolish of them if they're going to do that. They always have a right of what's called redemption, so they can always pay off what they owe. But, if their intention was to just buy it back, it would have been a lot better had they done that before all the late fees and interest and attorney's fees and everything else.
If a lien is filed, do you have to go to foreclosure, or can you wait to foreclose at the time of your choosing?
If a lien is filed, you have only 1 year to foreclose on it in a condo, or the lien is considered unforeclosable. In an HOA, you have 5 years. But we never recommend filing liens and then doing nothing with them. It sends the wrong message. Of course, look, if the debt is really low, if you file a lien and it's not a big amount of money, you can set a threshold amount at which you want to file a foreclosure. But even so, it sends a bad message that people can sort of hover around an amount of debt. And if the association's only willing to go so far, they can get away with that forever. So we do recommend pursuing the foreclosure, unless, look, sometimes people's debt is hovering around a few $100s. We're not going to file a foreclosure for that. In most instances, we do have some clients where their monthly dues are, let's say, $50 a month. So if someone goes a whole year without paying, it's only $600. But for that association, that's a whole year's worth of unpaid assessments. So there is some proportionality there. But again, it's using your best judgment for those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Does the length of the payment plan have to be the same for each person?
Nope.
Nope.
The board can allow it, but once you've allowed a payment plan of a certain length for one person, if someone else is aware of that, they can make an argument that they should be entitled to at least the same length as someone else.
Okay. If someone owes a condo fee, can they become a board member?
No, and they cannot on the last day that you can be a candidate for the board, you cannot owe any assessments. And in an HOA, you can't owe anything at all. So whenever the cutoff is for you to be a candidate, you really want to have a zero balance.
All right. And would a payment plan need to be drawn up by an attorney, or can the management company do this?
The management company can do this, but I'd imagine you guys probably tell your managers not to do that. We make the payment plan. We have a very strongly worded, good plan that we've crafted and tweaked over the years. I have seen sort of little simple plans that are done by the board or by a manager. But they don't think of all the outcomes of, well, what if the owner doesn't pay, or they miss a payment, or what is the penalty? How do and also in these payment plans, we want them to, for example, in our payment plans, we make them waive all their defenses, because we don't want to have someone go on a payment plan and then a month or two into it, they don't pay and we're chasing them, and then we're back at square one with no benefit for having them sign the plan. So the plan, if they default on the plan, in our plan, we have them agree that they waive their defenses other than the defense of payment, because otherwise you can get all these nonsense sort of technical defenses that we want to knock out. So if they want the benefit of a payment plan, we want some extra benefits to help us on the back end if they don't live up to it. And those are the sort of things that you never see in a manager or board created plan.
Yeah, I would definitely say have your attorney do it.
Yeah, so definitely. Yep.
How does homestead affect liens, foreclosures with and without a mortgage?
Homestead does not have any impact on it. These are secure liens. Unsecure liens you can't foreclose under homestead, like a credit card judgment or something, like a judgment for credit card debt. But a secure lien, which is like a real estate taxes, association debt, mortgage debt, those are what's called secured debt. And whether it's your homestead or not, you can be foreclosed.
Are payment plans considered contracts, and therefore need to be provided for all residents to see and be provided as part of the agenda packet for when the board approves the plan?
Generally, we don't take that approach. I mean, they are contracts. They are accessible if someone wants to see them, but they're settlement agreements of litigation. They're filed with the court, so there's nothing confidential or private about them. So they are open to inspection. But usually because our agreement, at least for my office, gives us standing authority to go into these payment plans, and we execute the payment plan on your behalf with the owner. So generally, if someone wants to see them, they can see them all they want. But because our representation agreement for my firm gives us the authority to enter into them on the board's behalf, we don't need them voted on at a meeting because we already have that authority given to us. But again, other lawyers, it might be different. So
when can a rent inception letter be initiated?
anytime.
Let's see here. After the lien has been filed and a year passes, can you file another lien instead of the foreclosure?
Yeah, you can relien the property, yes. But you have to go through, you have to give another 45 days and all that.
Are veteran mortgages treated differently?
Not for foreclosure. It has not, no.
All right, let's see here. On an assessment, if a payment plan is allowed by the board, should there be a signed note?
There's no note. It's not a promissory note. They sign an agreement, which I mean is the same thing effectively. But that's what we were talking about, having a lawyer drafted agreement. We do it. We probably have 400 people on payment plans, and they all have signed agreements. I've had clients that have told us, "Oh yeah, we have a payment plan." I said, "Let me see it." And they said, "Well, it's just a verbal agreement." No, everything is signed and memorialized. The owners agree they owe the money. They waive the defenses in the event of a default. They agree this is how much they pay a month, and it's all signed off.
What are some problems legally if a board decides not to proceed with a foreclosure? So I'm guessing they mean like they were going to, but then they decide they're not going to do it.
Well, if they decide, I mean, it's within their discretion, but there should be a valid reason for that, not just, well, I play poker with this guy and I don't want him to dislike me. The board should have a policy that's justifiable and reasonable. But again, if you put that policy out there and it's known, then owners know they can just not pay and the board's not going to do anything. So there needs to be follow through at some point. Maybe, the board says, well, we're going to hold off and wait a couple months or something like that. That's fine. But it should not be, just in perpetuity. We're not going to ever foreclose on anyone. That's just setting you up for mounting debt.
All right, here's one. Let me see. Hold on a second. Let me go back up here. If a third party buys the property through the foreclosure auction process, must the third party abide by the association's rules and bylaws, such as unit must be occupied by owner and cannot be rented for 2 years? If there are other violations that the prior owner had as it relates to the unit, do those violations carry over to the third party that purchased the unit?
Yeah, that's all attributable to the buyer. So the buyer has to abide by your rules. And that's why a lot of associations put limitations on leasing in the first year or two to dissuade investors from buying at a foreclosure, because they don't want those types of owners in their community. So yeah, those buyers at foreclosure have to abide by those occupancy rules. They don't have to go through an approval process themselves, but if they want to put an occupant in there, they have to abide by the rules. And if the rules say they can't do it, they can't do it. They also, if there's existing violations, the law provides that the owner doesn't get to be absolved by just saying, well, that's the prior owner made that problem. I'm not responsible. Once you buy the unit, you're responsible for all the violations on it, no matter how you acquire the title to it.
We have one on here, but we already mentioned it. So the time limit on a lien, I think you said it was 1 year for a condo and 5 for HOA, right?
Yeah, that's the time you have to foreclose from when it's recorded.
All right. Let's see here. If the property goes back to the HOA, can they sell the property and use any profits to pay the HOA monthly expenses?
You could, but in theory, if a property goes back to the HOA, it's only going to happen when a property has a very large mortgage on it. Otherwise, investors buy these properties. There's never an instance where it will not happen. So the only reason the HOA would take title is if the unit is really unsaleable. And again, we just never see HOAs take or condos taking title anymore. And like I said, if it did happen that way, it would be because there's so much debt that it's just not even workable for an investor, let alone the association. So the only avenue there would be renting the unit until the bank decides to foreclose, because selling it, you're just not going to be able to convey clear title because there's so much debt.
Mm-hmm. If a unit is seized by the US government due to criminal liability, and then the unit is being rented by the association, can the rent be increased to collect special assessments? Any other remedies?
I'm not sure how the unit being seized, if the unit's seized by the government, you can't collect rent anymore. There's no rental there anymore if the government has seized it. So, if the unit was being rented by the association and the government seizes it for unpaid tax liens or something like that, then the government owns it. So there's no right to rent that anymore.
Yeah. All right, let me see here. Let me see if there's like one or two more good ones. Let's see here. What about a collection agency's fees? What is the standard? Is there a place that homeowners can find what is a reasonable fee?
For a collection agency, I mean, agencies carry different fees. Most of them, in addition to charging fees, will keep the association's interest and late fees, which is your money. We as lawyers, we don't do that. So you get more money back with the lawyers. Most associations don't use collection agencies anymore. Again, that was a product of the recession. They didn't work out well. Most all of them went out of business. And they were not very, for anyone that was in the world of this world, back then, collection agencies were not, they sounded good and they were not a great deal ultimately for associations. They were tied to interest and late fees. So unfortunately, the longer they let cases linger, the more money that would accrue to their benefit, late fees and interest. So they were disincentivized to move cases forward. And that's exactly what happened. And, it was, without getting into the details of it, there are one or two collection agencies that specialize in association debt. I'm sure they can publicize and provide their fees. I don't know what they are, though.
All right, and let's do this one. Do all the attorney fees and costs end up being paid by the delinquent home or condo owner, or is the association responsible for any portion of your fees costs?
So 100% of our fees and costs are paid by the owner or the bank. At least at our firm, we never ever will bill the association unless they stop us from collecting. Other firms I know will charge if there's a bank foreclosure, they will make the association pay the fees on that. Or if they're unsuccessful in collecting because there's a bankruptcy or because there was the association took title, we never charge our clients fees. So if it's my job to collect the money, if I'm unsuccessful at it, I don't collect any money. But I can tell you, the reason we can do that is we're really good at this. We collect, and for anyone that's being charged fees for collections or foreclosures, we offer a zero cost model where, the fees and the costs get paid back to the association 100%.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.